See it. That's Patrick Christie's Tonight, weeknights from 9 p.m. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Martin Daubney, weekdays from 3 p.m.
Well, a new poll commissioned by Channel 4 shows that more than half of Gen Z believe that Britain should be ruled by a dictator. Seriously, they actually said that. Well, 1 in 3 would want an army. What's the army in charge? 1 in 3 want martial law.
There's something on the idea of some form of strong leadership. They have looked at British politics. They have looked at the politics in which they grow up in. And they see failures at the democratic level. They see a weak, a soft, a centre that doesn't do anything, makes promises and fails to deliver them. They see nothing actually happening. And they also see a future where they have no democratic engagement because they're never going to have a house. They're never going to have a family. Why would they? Why would they be able to? So the idea of having somebody strong to come through and blow away the cobwebs of our current system, I can see that being attractive. When I grew up, I was talking to not that old men and women who had been through the war, who knew what dictatorship was. Up until the 70s, we were in the Cold War. People knew what dictatorship was. They knew people being locked up, being sent to Siberia. They knew what this meant. And I don't think anybody under the age of 34 actually has a clue. It's all the other side of the world. It's in North Korea, it's in China. It's not here, and it's not part of their lived experience. And that's a big change.
And I wonder, actually, Nigel, if a lot of these people think, I don't know, like Donald Trump's a dictator. He got elected with a huge mandate. Do they understand what dictators is? Or, actually, are young people just so listless? They're so feeble-minded, they need to be told what to do and how to live.
I certainly think that Gwen's right about there's a disillusionment with democracy and the results of it. The idea that a dictatorship is the answer to it or having the military rule over us is obvious nonsense.
GB News, the People's Channel.
In the GB Newsroom, we bring you the news as it happens.
With our team of dedicated journalists across the UK.
We're ready to keep you up to date with what's happening every half an hour, every single day. Bulletins here on GB News.
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
I'm Michael Portillo. This is GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Good morning and welcome to the Camilla Tominey Show here on GB News. I'm delighted to be joined in the studio by Education Secretary Bridget Phillipson. Today I'm going to be asking her about her ongoing war of words with Britain's strictest head teacher, Catherine Birbalsingh. Shadow Defence Secretary James Cartledge will be here to discuss defence spending under the Tories and whether British troops should be sent to Ukraine. I'm also going to be speaking to Israel's Deputy Foreign Minister Sharon Haskell to discuss the BBC's coverage of the conflict in Gaza and the appalling murders of an Israeli mother, toddler and baby in Hamas captivity. As ever, we have got a cracking 90 minutes of punchy politics lined up for you this morning, so don't even think of going anywhere. But first, with me now to review the Sunday front pages is my fellow GB News presenter, Andrew Pearce, the consultant editor of The Mail.
Morning.
How lovely to see you, Pearcey,
you,
on this bright and breezy Sunday morning. It's not a bright and breezy set of papers, it's heavy-duty stuff, because a lot of coverage of course, the defence spending situation, Ukraine. Front page of The Telegraph. Starmer does seem to be minded to plough more money into defence, and that's backed up, to be fair, by John Healey, the Defence Secretary, writing quite a punchy piece in the Sunday Times, which when I read it, Andrew, I don't know what you thought, I sort of thought, oh, OK, you have kind of picked a side here and you seem to be siding with President Zelensky.
Yeah.
Although Starmer going out to Washington to meet with Trump on Thursday, he's navigating quite a tricky path here.
He's walking on a very difficult diplomatic tightrope because Trump is so unpredictable. Trump has made absolutely clear he thinks Zelensky is the dictator.
Yes.
I don't agree with that.
No, neither do I.
I think most people probably watching this programme don't agree with that. So Starmer has to... But Starmer, on the one hand, he wants to keep in with the President of the United States. He doesn't want tariffs on steel and other products. But equally, he's going to have to say, Mr. President, not only am I going to make the case for Ukraine, we're going to continue to give financial aid to Ukraine, and we hear that they're going to announce today a really big package of sanctions, more sanctions on Russia.
Yes. He can't go over to Washington and not make some pledge on defence spending, can he?
No.
Otherwise, it's just going to look really silly. That we're currently at 2.3%.
Yeah.
Tories pledged 2.5. That was meant to be, I think, by 2030. Now there's talk on the front of the Telegraph and other papers about bringing that target forward to 2028. Rachel Reeves won't like that, though, will she?
Rachel Reeves' Chancellor will not like that. We saw the borrowing figures this week, much worse than expected. But the Prime Minister has to remember one of his titles as Prime Minister, he's First Lord of the Treasury too. He has to simply overrule his Chancellor and say, we have to do it, we need to do it. And he's got to say when. Peter Mandelson, Lord Mandelson, the new ambassador, according to the Sunday Times today, has been urging Starmer behind the scenes to announce a date very quickly. I think he's got to announce before he sees the president when we will hit that target of 2.5%.
And that's what Kemi Badenoch has said. You need to make the commitment now before Thursday. And then there was an interesting line about Mandelson trying to do a bit of a quid pro quo, and he's going around apparently saying, mega, make our economies great again. That's going to be the big sale to Trump, ever the wheeler and dealer.
Yeah.
This is interesting as well. What bothers me slightly is how personal these barbs against Zelensky are becoming. We've got page 7 of the Sunday Express. Zelensky has been advised to relocate to France by a White House source. I don't think this is helpful.
No, it's not. Why they've taken... I mean, on the one hand, Trump said, didn't he, overnight, he was brave in standing up to Russia, but on the other hand, he's saying he's got no cards to play in this game of poker. He has. It's his country.
Yes.
And what did the West do when Ukraine invaded the first time in 2014?
Nothing. No,
absolutely nothing. And somehow we've got to make sure that the peace isn't all defeat for Zelensky.
No, of course not. I mean, we can't make it look like victory for Putin or defeat for Ukraine. This is the trouble. Talking of Trump, I love this idea now that Labour politicians are so welcoming of the big orange blonde, because if they had been in opposition right now, they would have been shooting their mouths off about what Trump said, particularly in the Truth Social post. We've now got talk that if Trump comes to the UK, he shall be allowed to speak in Parliament. Goodness me, what would John Bercow, the former Speaker of the House of Commons, think of this? Because, of course, he famously blocked him from speaking when he last came to town.
It will be because we suspect that when he goes to Washington, that Starmer is going to say state visit.
Yeah.
Name the date. It'll probably be next year. That could be a ride up the Mall in the carriage with the King and Camilla.
Yes.
But it will be so important for Trump if he does address both houses of Parliament. Mandela did it, Ronald Reagan did it. But as we know, the poison dwarf that used to be our Speaker, John Bercow, I was never a fan, never an admirer.
He isn't here to defend himself.
No, he's not.
But fair enough.
But Bercow blocked it because he could, because he is custodian of Parliament. The current Speaker is a much more emollient figure, Lindsay Hoyle. And I think if it is the wish of the government that the President speaks to both houses, he will approve it.
If I was Trump's people, I would insist on a cup of tea at City Hall. I would ask Sadiq Khan to lay out the scones, jam and cream, and make sure that that's all served nicely.
I'd pay money to be in the room for that.
Just with your royal hat on, Andrew, it is quite interesting that the Mail on Sunday have just sneaked in here a Prince William story saying Trump really wants to see Prince William at the White House. Slightly problematic for Buckingham Palace, that there seems to be this channel of communication between Trump and William and not Trump and Charles.
Well, they got on very well at Notre Dame. The reopening of Notre Dame
which the King probably should have gone to.
Probably should have gone to, but perhaps the King's restricting his overseas travel. But so there is definitely a ratio. And when I wrote, just before Manson became ambassador, I wrote in the Mail, he's already working on getting William and Kate to the United States because they are rock stars.
He wants Kate and Melania side by side in a photo shoot.
And what would that do for British special relations?
So do we, frankly, just from a newspaper perspective.
It would be brilliant.
Let's move on to Ed Miliband, because the point's been made by the Telegraph that his stance on fracking appears a little bit nutty when you consider that could, in turn, leave us vulnerable to Putin. Yeah, look, already there's too many countries having to rely on Putin's gas. So we think Miliband any day now is going to order the 2 fracking sites that were identified, the wells, are going to be cemented over. Why would you do that at this time? All because of his obsession with net zero. But also this obsession with these campaigners and earthquakes. Yeah. Apparently these earthquakes are less than when there is building construction in the area.
I'm sure that's right, yeah. Yeah. What do they think is going to happen? It's not going to measure on any Richter scale.
It hasn't happened in America, has it?
But a Labour MP's telling him not to do it, local councillors, but I'm afraid he'll do it, and it's a really retrograde step.
Crazy. 2 minutes to get in your thoughts on the thought police on the front of the Mail on Sunday. What's going on here? You would literally record a burglary and not have the police visit your house. And yet they're knocking on the door because somebody's posted something on Facebook, not even particularly incendiary, about...
a 54-year-old school administrator, Helen Jones, who lives in Stockport, put on Facebook she thinks these local councillors should resign after they were exposed in the Mail on Sunday for taking part in these deeply offensive WhatsApp messages, if you remember, a few weeks ago.
Fair comment.
And 2 police officers turn up at her door and tell her they want to give her advice not to do it. She's broken no law, and she points out that the area's been besieged. They've been besieged by car criminals, all that. Nobody ever sees a police officer. I'm not getting into that. There's been a chorus of condemnation. It is what they call a not... What do they call it?
Non-crime
hate incident.
Like the one that Alison Pearson, my Telegraph colleague...
It's absolutely that. Julie Bindle's... They are...
What? Sorry, what?
Is this the Stasi?
Infuriating.
Is this Eastern Europe? Is this East Germany?
But also, please, could you just crack down on shoplifting, crack down on knife crime and stop us from being burgled, or at least investigate our burglaries rather than this? What
is J.D. Vance, the Vice President of the United States, going to say? Because this will make waves in America.
Yeah.
He said that free speech is in danger in this country.
Yeah.
This is it.
Elon Musk will be on this.
Absolutely
quicker
right.
than you can see the dust trail left by his Tesla.
Absolutely.
Andrew Pearce, thank you very much indeed. Coming up next, I'm going to be speaking to Bridget Phillipson, the Education Secretary, which is going to be an interesting one because, of course, a couple of weeks ago I had Catherine Birbalsingh, Britain's strictest headmistress, in this studio accusing the Education Secretary of being a Marxist who hates academies. So I shall be putting that to her and seeing what she says. Don't go anywhere, back in just a jiffy.
I hope it doesn't rain.
Don't worry about it.
It'll spoil our holiday.
Relax, we're totally covered.
All Clear Travel Insurance sponsors GB News Travel Destinations Forecast.
Hello there. It still remains cold in Greece and Turkey with the risk of showers stretching westwards as well, but dry across western parts of the Mediterranean. Canary Islands, 17, 18 degrees. Madeira as well, seeing some bright or sunny spells. Dry across central southern parts of Spain and Portugal. Rain across the north, and then showers for Italy across into Greece, where it will also feel quite hot, cold. Temperatures 8, 9, 10 Celsius. Turkey as well on the cold side. Does slowly start to warm up through the latter part of the week.
All Clear Travel Insurance sponsors GB News Travel Destinations Forecast.
I'm Christopher Hope. From pop stars to politicians, I'll interview anybody in a pub who's got a political opinion. Join me every Friday on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, YouTube or gbnews.com, or wherever you get your podcasts. This is GB News, the People's Channel.
Mornings don't have to be tiresome, especially if you have the right company.
Wake up to news as it happens, opinion and debate, and of course, a little bit of entertainment too.
Because when the kettle's on, we're on.
That's Breakfast on GB News, a show worth waking up for.
Every morning from 6 a.m.
Only on the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
We'll spread the news, you spread the word.
This is Britain's Newsroom, where your voice matters.
It's just astonishing. With expert analysis and honest opinion, we don't just keep you informed.
We bring you unique perspectives you won't see anywhere else.
Can't argue with any of that. When the news happens, it happens here.
On Britain's Newsroom, weekdays from 9:30 a.m.
Only on GB News.
Hi, I'm Michelle Dewberry, and my show is your opportunity to cut through all the noise and dive in headfirst to some robust debates. Ideas clash.
Situation, isn't it?
No,
Because the failure is...
You're
the failure
deliberately avoiding my point. Nothing's held back.
And if you think this is the end of it, wait for more.
And we do not shy away from the difficult stuff.
Sometimes I want to shake people and say, if only you understood.
So join me on Jubes & Co. weeknights at 6 p.m, only on GB News, Britain's news channel.
We're proud to be GB News, the People's Channel. And as you know, we always love to hear your views. Now, there's a new way of getting in touch with us at gbnews.com/yoursay. By commenting, you can be part of a live conversation and join our GB News community. You can even talk to me, Bev Turner, or any of the members of the GB News family.
Good Afternoon Britain isn't just about us. The wonderful thing about this programme is it's about everyone watching. It's an interactive programme.
Well, there absolutely is something to see here, and we're going to be talking about it more. Whether it's breaking royal news, Will, please bring us up to date, or indeed a particularly punchy speech in the House of Commons.
Very, very curious.
We bring it to you live, and then we bring you live reaction as well.
That's Good Afternoon Britain, weekdays from midday.
Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Headliners on GB News 11 p.m. every night. It's got 3 top comedians going through the next day's newspapers so you don't have to read them, which is great.
That's a good point. He's lying. I mean, maybe he's not lying.
That's Headliners every night from 11 p.m. and 5 a.m. as well on GB News, Britain's news channel.
I'm Stephen Dixon, and thanks for joining us on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Welcome back to the Camilla Tominey Show, only on GB News. The Education Secretary, Bridget Phillipson, joined me in the studio earlier this morning. The Education Secretary, Bridget Phillipson, joins us now in the GB News studio. Lovely to see you in the flesh, Minister. Thank you for coming in. I'm glad you're here in person because I want you to address some of the concerns that Catherine Birbalsingh, the head teacher of the Michaela Community School in Wembley, raised with us a couple of weeks ago. And I wanted to give you a right of reply because there's been this war of words between you. She claims you're a Marxist. What's your reaction to that? I mean, do you consider that to be an insult, first of all?
Well, I think it'll be a surprise to people that know me well. Certainly a surprise to me. I've never really had my politics characterised in that way. I think what I would say just generally is I think that she has done a tremendous job, and I want to hear from school leaders across the country who have driven up standards in their schools and are really focused on the best life chances for children. I meet with school leaders every day. I really appreciate the chance to have quite open, frank conversations about what's working, what needs to change. But I always think that's done best on a basis of behind closed doors and on a private basis.
All right, although sources close to you did sort of brief to the press that she had behaved badly in this meeting, that it didn't go very well, that she had behaved, I think the word used was disgraceful at some point. What went on in this meeting? Did you just not get on?
I'm really not going to provide a lot of detail on this, partly because I really do value the chance to speak with school leaders, both out in the country when I'm visiting schools, but also in the Department for Education, on a really open but also private basis, because I think that's where we can have the best kinds of conversations. Yeah,
Final couple of questions on it. She claims that you hate academies and had always in opposition voted against academisation. Is that true?
I think academies, which were started under the last Labour government, of course, the academies programme, have been a tremendous part of how we have delivered better life chances for children. What I'm focused on at the moment now, however, is making sure that the excellence that exists in some pockets is spread right across all schools. And that's why the focus that we are bringing on school standards is to those 600 schools that are stuck. So schools that where we know they haven't been performing as they should, where there hasn't been a focus on rising standards. And that's why we're putting in place more support into those schools with expert advisors, our RISE teams, people with a track record in education of turning around schools. So I think academies have delivered some amazing innovation, but I want that to be spread across the country.
To be fair, I made that point to Ms Birbalsingh. I said, she's worried about losing autonomy because she's saying we're running a really good school here and we're doing that because we've got choice, freedom of choice. Presumably this is tailored to the schools that aren't that well run. You want to take more government control over them because you think that that autonomy is a bad thing in some cases?
We'll intervene more rapidly in schools that are not performing, absolutely. But I would just add, however, that applies to schools that are run by local councils as well as schools that are academies, because sadly some schools that are academies are not performing as they should, or as we would, or as parents would expect. But the changes that we're bringing in through the bill are things like, for example, requiring all new teachers coming into a school to be either qualified or to be working towards becoming a qualified teacher. I think your viewers would expect that, you know, the teacher at the front of the classroom is either qualified or on the path to qualification, because I think teaching is a really valuable and valued profession. We should recognise the training, the professionalism, the quality of our teaching workforce, investing in them as we are doing. But also if we're to do that, then I think it's a fairly, you know, reasonable expectation. This is about a core set of expectations that wherever you are in the country, you can be guaranteed as a parent that the teacher is qualified, that there's a good national curriculum, and that you have a school that is focused on better life chances for all children.
Are you going to visit Michaela?
I'm always open to visiting schools. Of course, I will always, in addition, meet with school leaders in the department as well as out across the country.
OK, so you're not ruling that out?
I would never rule out visiting any school.
She's openly invited you on this show and others to go and visit Michaela, if you want to.
Sure.
On schools in general and the Children's Wellbeing and Schools Bill, which has been described by the opposition leader, Kemi Badenoch, as a legislation that amounts to educational vandalism, there could be the argument, and I appreciate Labour have been very, very critical of the Tories' 14 years of power, but at the same time, actually, school standards have improved under the Conservatives, haven't they? I mean, I think there is now, according to the OECD, a sort of record performance by English schools, at least, in maths. So the question might be, if it isn't broke, then why fix it?
So there are real strengths within our education system, and I think that is where there has been consensus over many years about, for example, investing in our teaching workforce, because we know the single biggest way you can improve outcomes for children is by really high quality teaching. But alongside that, other changes that have stood the test of time, like Ofsted, making sure there is clear accountability around schools, although we're setting out reform in that space as well. What I would say just on the bill more widely is that the bill is the single biggest piece of child protection legislation in a generation, something I know that is of concern to your viewers and people across the country. How do we do more to prevent child exploitation, child sexual abuse? And there are lots of measures in the bill on that. Alongside that, practical measures in the bill to cut the cost of school uniform for parents. We're putting more money back into their pockets and delivering breakfast clubs in our primary schools. And I'm setting out today our plan to deliver the first 750 early adopters free new breakfast clubs in schools across England that will make such a big difference to children's life chances. A soft start to the day. I've seen the difference breakfast clubs can make, and I want more children and parents to have that benefit. And on the schools measures, there are strengths in our system, absolutely. But let's be clear, there are real problems within the system too. Too many children, including children with special educational needs, are not getting the outcomes that they deserve. We've got a big gap between outcomes for children from poorer families and better off families, something that did not improve in the way that it should have done under the Conservatives. And to our position in international rankings, look, you've got to tread with a bit of care on the rankings, and the Conservatives were told about this because it's a relative measure. What is clear, however, is that actually we're falling in terms of performance by way of scores. So yes, I will always celebrate and recognise what's working really well, but I think there's just such complacency from the Conservatives, more interested in defending their record than on delivering better life chances for children today.
On the breakfast clubs front, isn't it parents' responsibility primarily to make sure that their children have had breakfast in the morning?
Yes, of course parents have responsibilities. But what this does is it will give parents more choices at the start of the working day, because I think everybody knows that your childcare needs don't end when your children start at primary school. So it will give parents more choice. It will provide really important childcare as well as that healthy start to the day.
Okay.
But the evidence is clear that breakfast clubs it's about the club, not just the breakfast. There is clear evidence about the impact breakfast clubs have on children's attendance at school, their behaviour, their well-being. I think that's really important for all children. And coming out of the pandemic, you know, we know that lots of children haven't spent the same amount of time with their friends. It's a chance to build those friendships, build confidence. And some of the examples I've seen have been not just the breakfast, but children having the chance to take part in reading activities, Lego, sports activities. This is a fantastic opportunity for children and for parents.
You were talking earlier about SEN. We know that some SEN children who are in private schools have been adversely affected by the decision to put VAT on fees. We know that some schools have closed down. We should perhaps also point out that these private schools are also paying now higher employers' national insurance fees and indeed higher business rates. If private schools have closed down as a result of this policy, you can't claim it to have been a success, can you?
Private schools, I'm afraid to say, close every year under any government.
Because of this policy, and a number of them have said they're closing because of this. If you've come out with a policy in education that has ended up closing schools down and making teachers redundant, it can't be deemed a success, can it?
This policy will raise a significant amount of money that we can then use to invest in our safety net.
But can you just address that point? Yeah. School closures on a education secretary's watch are a bad thing, aren't they?
Look, private schools closed every year under the last Conservative government.
They close all the time.
But they close all the time because parents have got choices as to where they choose to educate their children.
They're citing this policy as to why they've closed.
Look, their fees have gone up, year after year, way beyond inflation, pricing out parents.
But listen, how can you be happy that any schools are closing on your watch? Private, state. In this case, it's private, and they're citing this policy. How can you possibly advocate that? Because you're not just talking about schools closing, pupils then having to go into the state system. You're also talking about teachers losing their jobs.
So private schools, as I say, close every year, and they did under the Conservatives. Private schools are independent businesses. They prize that.
So it's OK for schools to close? They
prize that independence. Well, of course, no one would want to see that happen, but we do face, alongside this, both in the state and the private sector, a falling birth rate, and that is going to have consequences in the years to come. It's why we've got already significant numbers of spare places across the country because of that falling birth rate. But private schools, as businesses, will face choices as to how they manage their money. But alongside that, parents have got choices. Parents have got choices as to how they spend their money. And of course, if they choose not to opt for a particular school and demand falls, that is how the market operates.
OK, so that seems to you to be concluding that it's OK that some private schools close. You're happy to see private school closures?
No, I don't want disruption to children's education if that were to result. But private schools, as I say, have closed in significant numbers for many, many years. This is not a new phenomenon.
OK. Keir Starmer's giving a speech today, and he's going to be saying that reform represents dangerous right-wing politics. What's dangerous about right-wing politics?
I think what we've seen with reform, just take, for example, an issue that will be of concern to your viewers around how we continue to back the Ukrainian people and President Zelensky in their hour of need. I think reform have been very equivocal in the approach that they have been taking. This is a key issue around our national security. It's why the Prime Minister later this week will be visiting the US to underline our commitment not just to the special relationship with the US, but also the fact that we believe that Britain and our European allies need to play a greater role in European defence and security.
So on that note, is defence spending definitely going up?
Defence spending is already going up. At the budget, the Chancellor put an extra £3 billion into the budget.
There's been talk now of getting it to that 2.5 figure that was committed to by the Conservatives by 2028 now, not 2030.
We know we need to further increase defence spending. I think that is very, very clear. And alongside that, we are committed to reaching 2.5% of GDP. We'll be setting out the pathway towards that. But what we also need to do is make sure that we're backing the Ukrainian people and the conflict that is happening as we speak. And that's why every year we are committing £3 billion of additional investment to support that effort, to put Ukraine in the strongest possible position. I mean, this isn't simply a distant conflict that has no effect on people here. This is in the interest not just of the continent around freedom and democracy, but it's also had big consequences here in terms of energy bills, for example, the instability that has been caused. And we believe that the British government should step up and play a bigger role. And that's why we do welcome the approach of President Trump in bringing parties to the negotiating table in seeking to secure an enduring and lasting settlement for Ukraine.
All right, Bridget Phillipson, thank you very much indeed for joining me this morning. Well, who would have thought it? Bridget Phillipson welcoming Donald Trump's movements on Ukraine. What did you make of that interview with the Education Secretary?
I thought the most interesting area was her resolute defence of the school and private schools policy. It's wicked in my view. They should, if they were going to do it, they could have waited till next September, or at least had a whole full year instead of tearing children out of class in schools. I think it's really...
This introduction of the fees in January as opposed to September is weird. She is absolutely resolutely focused that is a good idea. And even if you put to her the idea of school closures, of teachers being made redundant, of special educational needs pupils suffering...
Absolutely right. She's so tribal on this and ideological on this point, I think, and a lot of Labour frontbenchers are. They think it's a really popular policy. I think they're misguided on it. I think people think it is really, really a bad policy.
Also, she's not having a glass of Chardonnay with Catherine Birbalsingh any day soon, is she? Let's be honest,
I think she's in a rush to see her, is she?
No, indeed. Well, Shadow Defence Secretary James Cartledge is going to be with me after the break. I'm going to be speaking to him about what the Tories are saying about defence spending, and we're going to be hearing from the Prime Minister, who's speaking at the Scottish Labour Conference in Glasgow after the break, so don't go anywhere because there's still a lot more to come.
miss your chance to be one of 2 big winners in our latest Great British giveaway, as we have 2 prize bundles that have to be won. There's 2 lots of a totally tax-free £10,000 in cash. You'll also receive a brand new iPhone 16, along with £500 in shopping vouchers to spend at your favourite store. Hurry, lines close on the 7th of March. For another chance to win, text cash to 63232. One entry costs £2 plus 1 standard network rate message, or text bonus to 63232. 5 entries cost £5 plus 1 standard network rate message. Go to gbnews.com/win. Entries start from just £2. Call 0903 681 3232. Calls cost £2 plus your network access charge, or post your name and number to GB11 PO Box 8690 Derby DE1 9TT. UK only. Entrants must be 18 or over. Lines close at 6 p.m. on the 7th of March. Please check the closing time if listening or watching on demand.
Sunday with Michael Portillo from 11, only on GB News.
Inside Number 9, Stage/Fright. So Inside Number 9, massive cult BBC 2 show. One half of the League of Gentlemen, so Steve Pemberton, Reece Shearsmith, they are the kind of creative geniuses behind all those sorts of shows. So it's weird, wonderful, macabre, sort of very, very black comedy. And this is their kind of farewell thank you to fans. It is such a niche show and such an extraordinary success already ticket-wise. It's virtually sold out. We're hoping it's going to actually extend. Stunning. So basically, it's 2 or 3 of their episodes mashed together. I haven't seen the show. Absolutely fine. So for me, it was actually just a revelation. Other friends have seen the shows and they were just ecstatically happy. The only new bit is an opening segment of about 10 minutes when the stage pulls back and we see seats facing up with a few people dotted around. It's the most fantastic play on terrible behaviour in theatre audiences. With one man getting increasingly annoyed and basically doing the things that we've possibly thought about but would never do, and all the misbehaviours meet gruesome ends. So don't try this at home. But, you know, certainly a couple of times you've been like, "Argh!" The rest of the show, the first half is based on Bernie Clifton's Dressing Room. It's 2 old-time comedians reunited, very melancholy. Second half is a very gothic-y kind of Grand Guignol, sort of schlocky horror, eyeballs coming out of the face, paintings moving, and then there's a show within rehearsals. There's a ghost, brilliant riffs on everything that's been going on in the West End, handheld camera scenes, which they're mocking, and pop stars cranked into major theatre productions.
I'm liking some of the satire you're describing here.
It's so much fun.
GB News, the People's Channel.
Welcome back to the Camilla Tominey Show here on GB News. Lots more still to come this morning. Shortly, I'm going to be joined by the Shadow Defence Secretary James Cartledge. I'm also going to be joined by Israel's Deputy Foreign Minister Sharon Haskell to discuss the BBC's coverage of the conflict in Gaza and the appalling murders of Shiri, Ariel and Kfir Bibas while in Hamas captivity. And we're expecting to hear from the Prime Minister speaking live from a Scottish Labour conference in Glasgow. So a very busy hour to come. Stay tuned, and we'll be back with the Shadow Defence Secretary in just a moment. As I say, the Shadow Defence Secretary, James Cartledge, joins me now. Thank you very much indeed for joining me, Mr Cartledge. We've seen the letter from Kemi Badenoch to Keir Starmer basically urging for more defence spending to be announced before Starmer heads to Washington for his meeting with Donald Trump on Thursday. But I need to put it to you, Mr Cartledge, that I'm wondering whether the Tories actually have a leg to stand on when it comes to defence spending. In real terms, defence spending fell by 22% between 2009 and 10 and 2016 and 17. Spending as a share of GDP was at its lowest in 2015. That was when the Tories were in power. And between then and now, defence spending has only increased in real terms by a total of £8.5 billion. So actually, defence spending has gone down under the Tories' watch, not up.
Well, if you go back to the end of the last Labour government back in 2010, Obviously, the challenge we had then as a country is that we faced bankruptcy, essentially. The Chief Secretary of the Treasury, who's in charge of public finances under Labour, had left a note for us that there's no money left. So we did have to take very difficult and painful decisions. Actually, the Labour government were planning, if they'd won, to cut defence spending by 25%. So, yeah, we did have to take some difficult decisions then. But the thing I would stress is that, you look at 2019, when Boris Johnson became Prime Minister, the threat position was already starting to worsen, and we had the biggest sustained increase in defence spending since the Cold War, when it went up to 2.3%. It's been sustained at that level since. But we do think, given what's happening, it does need to go up again.
OK, so considering that admission then, do you admit now that it was a mistake not to invest more in defence spending? I appreciate what you're saying about the austerity years. I also appreciate what you're saying about what Labour were planning to do, but that was under Jeremy Corbyn, which probably isn't the closest comparator to sensible politics. So do you now regret that you didn't spend more on defence?
Just to clarify, Camilla, just to clarify, Camilla, I wasn't talking about Jeremy Corbyn. I was talking about, had Labour won in 2010, they had a plan which was to cut defence spending by 25%.
OK. I'm sure that Jeremy Corbyn may well have doubled down on that pledge when he ran for office. But in terms of the Tories' own record then, Mr Cartledge, just in light of everything that Donald Trump has said in recent days, do you now regret that the Tories didn't invest more on defence spending?
Well, the challenge for the country at the time was to get the books in order. We were facing terrible financial crisis. Just to put it in context, because I think a lot of people aren't aware of this figure, right? The budget deficit, which is the country's overdraft, which Labour inherited when they won the election last July, was 4.4%. It was over 10%. It was over 10% in 2010 when we took over. And the difference, if it had been 10% last July, the difference is about 160 billion. That's the size of the NHS's budget last year in England. Just to give you a sense of the scale. So yes, we had to make very difficult decisions, and obviously we'd rather not have done that. Of course, we would rather not have done that. But you have to govern in the national interest, and that was the national interest at the time.
One more question looking backwards, because we must look forward, but the counter-argument to that is, why on earth did David Cameron spend so much on foreign aid? He could have ploughed that money into defence. So you did have choices back then. Many people criticised him for putting so much into foreign aid. He did that, arguably, at the expense of our own defences.
Well, I mean, look, as you say, we can debate the past as long as we want to. I think the key thing is we did have to take some very, very difficult decisions at the time. I also think in the international situation we were in, there was also a bit more of a consensus, and not everyone would have agreed with this at the time, that aid was an important way of helping to improve our security by investing in countries becoming less unstable abroad, etc.
Didn't really work, though, did it?
Like, of the nation-to-nation military. Let me finish, Gil. There was less of the nation-to-nation military threat that we now face today. It's a very serious threat. That doesn't mean I wish we hadn't spent more at the time, but we had to make those difficult decisions. And as I say, but the real test here is that you spend according to the threat you face. And in 2019, with the threat picture starting to deteriorate, we increased spending, the biggest sustained increase since the Cold War, to 2.3%. 2.3%, actually significantly more than a lot of other NATO countries. But look, we got to election. If you want to measure, do we think, how much do we think defence spending should go up by? Are we true to our word? Well, we're still at the general election with a plan to increase again to 2.5%, funded by reducing the size of the civil service. But I think how I would summarise it is this: that basically, since the Second World War, defence spending has been falling, particularly since the end of the Cold War. We thought we were in a new era of peace. That's clearly not the case anymore, and so spending is starting to go back up again, and it has to, and we have to be open with the country about that. And the letter from Camilla Badenoch today makes clear we as a party are willing to be serious and face up to the difficult decisions you've got to make if you're going to find the money to significantly increase defence spending, as we have to deliver security for our country.
We could summarise by saying that defence spending has gone down as the state has got larger under both Labour and Conservative successive governments. But let's move on to what Trump actually said, because I'd like to know from you whether you think he's right or wrong on the following assertions. Did the Ukrainians start the conflict in either 2014 or 2022?
No, they were invaded by Russia.
OK, is Zelensky a dictator without elections?
No. He is a democratically elected leader. He is not holding elections because his country is under martial law, because it is at war. When we were at war, Winston Churchill didn't hold elections because that was the national interest at the time.
Has Ukraine strong-armed the United States into spending hundreds of billions of dollars to, quotes, go into a war that couldn't be won?
Well, America has actually given a huge amount of aid to Ukraine. We should recognise that. I think it's tens of billions of dollars. We have also, relative to the size of our military, actually probably been the most generous donor, if you measure it in those terms. And we've given a huge amount of our inventory. We had to do that. It was in our national interest. If Ukraine had fallen early and capitulated, I think the world would be in a far more dangerous position than it is now. It's not in a good position now, but it would have been, Russia's forces would have been right on the edge of NATO and threatening us directly, I feel. So it was the right thing to do, and I think we should recognise that America did give significant aid.
OK, and what do you make of Trump's comment, Zelensky better move faster, he's not going to have a country left?
Camilla, if you've brought me on to go through every one of Donald Trump's comments, well, fair enough. I mean, look, I think I want to step back and say he has his mandate, and we respect that. Donald Trump was elected President of the United States with a clear mandate. He said to his people he wanted to get a peace deal quickly in Ukraine, and he is proceeding with his usual vigour to try and achieve that, and we have to represent our national interests in this. And what I would say is I think they overlap very strongly, and the key thing that I want to see is that when the Prime Minister Keir Starmer goes out to Washington, he stresses that an outcome we must avoid is that if Russia is seen in any way to win from any kind of settlement, should there be one, I think that would be bad for the United States and for ourselves and all of NATO, because it would send a terrible message to other adversaries, not least China, and I think it would embolden them.
All right, James Cartledge, thank you very much indeed for joining me this morning. Lovely to speak to you. Well, retired General Lord Richard Dannett, the former Chief of the General Staff, joins me now. Lord Dannett, thank you very much indeed for your time this morning. I'm going to ask you a fairly straightforward question that probably doesn't have a straightforward answer, but how does this end? How does it end in Ukraine? Now, Trump has said what he said, Zelensky's saying what he's saying, and we've got Starmer and Trump due to meet in Washington on Thursday.
Well, as you said, Camilla, there is no easy answer to this. I'm afraid, in my view, we are in a no different place to where we were 3 years ago, with Putin having wanted to take over the whole of Ukraine, absorb Ukraine back into Russia, and Zelensky perfectly reasonably wanting to defend the sovereignty and independence of his country. Those positions are irreconcilable, and frankly, nothing has really changed. I mean, what is changing in the middle of that is Donald Trump's desire, his rhetoric, his grandstanding to say that he wants to end the war. Now, that's perfectly reasonable and laudable, but the question is how to do it. And he hasn't got a formula as to how to do it. What he's pressing for is some kind of ceasefire. But a ceasefire would probably be the worst outcome at the present time. Yes, of course, the killing would stop and the consumption of ammunition and all the rest of it would stop. But the effect that that would have would then be to give time back to the Russians to reconstitute their armed forces, to regather their strength, and consider either pressing again in a new offensive in Ukraine, or even worse than that, pressing somewhere else against another European country that has a common border with Russia. And it's all that thinking which is behind the pressure that so many of us have been trying to argue the case for not just months, but for years, that we in this country and other European countries should increase their defence spending to make sure that not that we're capable of fighting a war, but we've got a sufficiently capable set of armed forces that we can deter further aggression from Russia. That's what this is really all about. And that's why, yes, it's good to move eventually to 2.5% of GDP, but 3 or 3.5% is actually nearer the mark.
So, Lord Dannett, I can't be the only person that's quite confused about President Trump's stance in all this. On one hand, it does look as if he is handing some kind of victory to Putin if Putin can walk away with what is effectively stolen Ukrainian territory. However, the pragmatist in me says, you know, the Ukrainian people are tired, they've had enough, the Europeans and America haven't given them enough armaments to win this war, they've only given them enough armaments not to lose it completely. And then equally, what are we saying? Are you saying that you think the Western world, a little bit like in 2014, is once again being quite naive? This idea, oh, we cede 20% of Ukrainian territory back to Putin. We put some troops on the ground there in Ukraine. We make sure that Ukraine is viewed as a sovereign nation, and he will then leave the Baltic states alone. Is this the Western world once again being asleep at the wheel, do you think?
What you've just described there, Camilla, is the supreme act of appeasement. And if we go back to our history books and look at the 1930s, that's exactly what happened then. The Sudetenland and Czechoslovakia were negotiated away between Western powers, Neville Chamberlain in particular, and Adolf Hitler, over the heads of the people that were concerned. And what did that lead to? It didn't lead to peace, it led to war. It led to war largely because we were weak. And here we are again, all these years later, in the same sort of position. So I'm afraid, go back to the earlier part of the conversation we were having, I can't see any practical alternative other than countries, hopefully still the United States, but maybe less likely them, but other European countries, continuing to double down on our support to Zelensky and Ukraine, and endeavor to allow the Ukrainians to be as strong as they can. Yes, 20% of their country is now in Russian hands, but that doesn't mean we should give up on the principle of that being sovereign Ukrainian territory. Yes, Ukraine would like to be an independent country. It would like to be a member of the EU, and one day it would like to be a member of NATO. That's entirely legitimate. What Zelensky doesn't want to do is to allow his country to drift back to where it was in the days of the Cold War under Russian Soviet domination. He's rejecting that form of lifestyle. He wants the kind of lifestyle that we enjoy in the West. And that's perfectly reasonable. And we have an absolute duty to support them. Frankly, what Trump does is just mystifying. He may well have duped a sufficient majority of the American people to think that his rhetoric will make America great again. But don't let us get dragged down and let him make the West weak again. Frankly, it's not acceptable. And if he's not prepared to be a leader on the world stage, we've got to find some Europeans to stand up and show that leadership themselves.
What do you make so far of Keir Starmer's leadership on this issue? We've got John Healey, the Defence Secretary, writing in the Sunday Times today, very much showing his allegiance to President Zelensky. How do you think the Labour government is handling this?
Well, they're handling it as well as they can, given that they are absolutely hamstrung and caught in the headlights of spending. We've heard so much about the black hole that they inherited from the last government. And frankly, let's remember that in 2010, when David Cameron became Prime Minister, the then Chief Secretary of the Treasury, the outgoing Labour one, left a message on the desk saying, there is no money. So we've been there before. So let's not go forward looking back over our shoulders. Let's look at the situation today, which actually is even different from July last year. Look at the situation today and say, what needs to be done? And if what needs to be done means that we've got to spend more money directly supporting Ukraine, spend more money in increasing our defence capability, then that's what we've got to do. And if, goodness me, Camilla, if that means we've got to put up taxes in this country, shock horror, let's do it. And you and I and everyone else watching this programme will have to shoulder some of the burden. When times are tough, we all have to tighten our belts and we have to accept sacrifices. And if that's in the greater interest of the security of this country, that's much more important than new hospitals, roads, schools, and critical national infrastructure. Our security is what matters most. We have to pay for it.
And Lord Dannett, finally and briefly, we have this situation where you're describing what you think is going on right now as a form of appeasement. So is it overstating it to suggest that Starmer, not least because of the lack of leadership in the rest of Europe, in France and Germany, both on a precipice when it comes to forthcoming elections, does this mean that Starmer needs to be the Churchill figure here? And is he capable of that?
Well, I don't know whether he's capable, but he has the opportunity. He's going to have a difficult time when he goes to the White House on Thursday, but John Healey, his Defence Secretary, are making the right noises. Rachel Reeves will hate this from a spending point of view. But go back to what I was saying just now. When needs must, then things must be done. This is Starmer's opportunity to try and show some Churchillian characteristics. And why not? This is a great opportunity. Don't be faced down by Trump, bullied by Trump. Britain can stand up for Europe. And I think this is his opportunity. So come on, Keir Starmer, give it a good go.
All right, fair enough. Wise words from you, as ever, Lord Dannett. Thank you very much indeed for joining me this morning on GB News. We're just waiting for Keir Starmer to speak. He's going to be addressing the Scottish Labour conference. He's going to be speaking about reform, of all things. Before he does that, before I get the go live to Starmer, just have a quick chat with you, Andrew Pearce. Lord Dannett there being, as we would understand, typically hawkish on the military front. Can Starmer be the Churchill figure he needs to be next week in Washington?
It's a noble idea, but I suspect not. He certainly hasn't got the oratorical skills, has he? But what he's got a simple solution. Camilla Badenoch's written about it in one of the papers today. Cut foreign aid.
I did make this point with James Cartledge.
You did.
He's going on about the Cameron era. Hang on, I think we can now cross live.
Right.
No, we're just going to look at footage.
Yeah, cut the
We
foreign
don't
aid
want to see
budget.
the preamble. He's walking onto the stage. I'm going to come to this in just a moment, but carry on, Andrew.
Cut the foreign aid budget, which is £14 billion a year. You want £6 billion extra. Cut it to £8 billion. There we are, done. And you can put that money immediately into defence.
Oh, look, there's a little photo opportunity taking place now, and the Prime Minister's about to speak in Scotland. Let's go live to that footage in Glasgow.
I bet he doesn't sound like Churchill.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you very much, conference. Thank you so much. It's really good to be back. I have to admit that after the rugby yesterday, I was a little bit nervous about coming out, but you have to let us have that one. Look, England victories are about as rare as the SNP in Westminster these days, so we've got to have that one, I'm afraid. And thank you, Neil. That was really fantastic to hear your story, telling it from up here. It's really hard to do that. You absolutely smashed it. And Neil's mum is here today. You must be so proud, and rightly so. Neil, you're showing what a Labour government can do, saving Haaland and Wolf, supporting Scottish jobs, securing the future of Scottish shipbuilding. Conference, that's the difference that Labour makes. And we can only make that difference because of your hard work. I saw it right here in Glasgow when we kicked off the election. I've seen it right across Scotland. In the campaign, of course, but beyond that. Everything the Labour movement has achieved, past and future, everything, comes from the efforts of its people. So that victory in July, conference, that's your victory. It belongs to you. You changed the future of our country, and I say to you, thank you for your hard work. Because of your work, Scotland no longer sits on the Westminster sidelines, sending a message. Remember that, the height of the SNP ambition. No, Scotland is in government. A new generation of Scots. Michael Shanks leading the way on clean British energy. Douglas Alexander fighting for Scottish businesses in a challenging world. Kirsty McNeil standing up for Scottish interests at home and overseas. And Ian Murray, from the lone Scottish Labour MP to the Secretary of State for Scotland in a Labour government. And conference, look at the difference it makes. Fuel duty cut. The national living wage increased, £1,400 extra in the pockets of working people, ending fire and rehire, scrapping unfair zero-hours contracts, strengthening maternity rights, making work pay, the biggest levelling up of workers' rights in a generation. That's what change looks like, conference. And I am personally so grateful to so many of you here today, to Anas and to Jackie, and so many others, for your friendship, for your support, but above all, your leadership, your example. Because a victory like ours can sweep away memory and defeat. But there was a time, and it wasn't that long ago, when people said Labour could never win in Scotland again. When I became leader, when Anas became leader, that is what so many people thought. But Conference, I never believed it, because of you, the brightness of your conviction, the fire and determination to fight for your communities, a better Scotland in a Britain once again in the service of working people. And Conference, let me repeat what I said during that campaign, that with Labour in power, there would be a government in Westminster, not just working for the benefit of the Scottish people, but working with the government in Scotland. And I meant that. Just days after the election, I was here, meeting the First Minister. I was very clear that while we will always have our differences about the future of Scotland, the first duty of my government is delivering for the people of Scotland. Scotland comes first. We won't play political games. We won't indulge in constitutional grandstanding. We won't lose our focus on what matters to the Scottish people, the work of change that's needed, on the cost of living, on immigration, on public services. And look, where the Scottish Government have different spending priorities, we won't block that ambition, as the Tories did. We will work with them. We believe in devolution, the democratic right of the Scottish people to take a different direction to Wales and England. That's what devolution means. But Conference, while we will work with whoever the Scottish people elect, just imagine what we could achieve together. Imagine the possibilities for change if we end the 19-year SNP rule in Scotland as emphatically as we ended the 14 years of Tory rule in Britain. A Labour government in Westminster, a Labour government in Holyrood, with Anas Sarwar, the Labour First Minister. That's an offer we can take to Scotland with confidence, an offer grounded in a new hope and an old reassurance. And that's what we've seen this week with the announcement that Anas has made. A new determination to roll up our sleeves and reform NHS Scotland. The hope, finally, of a Scottish Government committed to what the Scottish people want. The turnaround of Scottish hospitals, Scottish schools and Scottish public services. We can take that message into the fight, Conference. We can turn the page on the cosy Tory and SNP arrangement, the pact of decline that has no interest in making devolution work, no interest in Scotland's success. But Conference, in recent weeks, we've also seen that our old argument remains as vital as ever, that Scotland and Britain, standing together, united by the solidarity of working people, is the only way to face down the instability of the world beyond these islands, as it has always been. And on the eve of the third year of Russian aggression in Ukraine, I know that this conference, indeed the Scottish people, stand with the people of Ukraine. Because, Conference, peace only comes through strength. Nobody wants the bloodshed to continue. Nobody, least of all the Ukrainians. But after everything that they have suffered, after everything that they have fought for, there can be no discussion about Ukraine without Ukraine, and the people of Ukraine must have a long-term secure future. At conference, I've seen firsthand the devastation Putin has caused. Just a few weeks ago, I was in Kyiv. I met soldiers in the burns unit of a hospital who fought on the front line of freedom. I spoke to children who are growing up under constant bombardment. Some of them, primary school age, have lost their parents to the conflict. I've been to Bucha, the town where Russian soldiers handcuffed civilians and shot them in the head in cold blood. Trust me, conference, you don't forget a place like that. You don't forget the conversations that I had there. People who had to gather up the bodies of their friends, their family, their brothers and sisters, and wheel them into a mass grave using shopping trolleys. You don't forget things like that. But mark my words, what I have seen only makes me more determined to stand up for Ukraine, to put them in the best possible position and make sure they have the security and the hope that they need. And look, we can be proud that we stood up. I'm proud of the thousands of British families who opened their homes to fleeing Ukrainians. I'm proud that the yellow and light blue flutters on village halls the length and breadth of these islands. And I'm proud that we've shown once again that we are a nation that will not be cowed by threats or tyranny. But as we enter a new phase in this conflict, we must now deepen our solidarity even further. It's not just moral urgency that demands this. It's also in our national interest. Russia already menaces our waters, our online spaces, even at times our streets. And the economic insecurity that the conflict has caused, the rising bills, cost of living crisis, that will only continue unless we have a resolution that is fair and stable for Ukraine. This is one of the great lessons of our history. Instability in Europe always washes up on our shores. And this is a generational moment. I've been saying for some time that we Europeans, including the United Kingdom, have to do more for our defence and security. The US is right about that. In this new era, we can't cling on to the comforts of the past. It's time to take responsibility for our security, our continent. And I'm clear that Britain will take a leading responsibility. We have to be ready to play our role if a force is required in Ukraine once a peace agreement is reached. And we have to be ready to reshape our economy with industrial policy, to stand up for Ukraine, to stand up for Europe, but most of all, to stand up for our security, because Ukraine is vital to us. But to succeed in this endeavour, at home and abroad, we must commit fully to the cause of change, remove the blockages, tear down the barriers, focus each day on the fight for the priorities of working people. Now, what working people want hasn't changed. They want a stable economy, their country to be safe, their borders secure, more cash in their pocket, safer streets in their town, opportunities for their children, cheaper energy in their home, and an NHS that is fit for the future. But we can't underestimate just how little faith there is from working people most of all, that politics can still deliver this for their family. Because it hasn't. Not here in Scotland with the SNP, not in Britain with the Tories, and not, if we're honest, in many places around the world recently. But do not doubt that this project is right for our Times conference. Do not doubt that we will weather the storm and deliver for Scotland and Britain. If the question of this era is whether politics can serve the interests of working people, then this era demands a Labour answer, a Scottish answer. Now, a couple of weeks ago, and you may or may not have seen this, but scientists found a new inscription on the Galloway Hoard. And if you don't know, conference, that's a treasure trove of Viking-era objects found in Scotland. These objects are over 1,000 years old. They were found about 10 years ago. And it's taken a long time to work out what the inscription says on the treasure. This is what it says. This is the community's wealth. Conference, the soil we walk on has a life and a character. And this is Scotland's character. It's always been Scotland's character. The wealth of this nation belongs to the community, to every person. Now that's what fired the imagination of the people who founded this party. That's what drove people who built this nation, who transformed our union into a bond across these islands, woven in the solidarity of working people. And it's that same cause which must now guide us to a better future together, a new hope for Scotland, in a Britain once again united by the interests of working people. But change will be hard, conference. Our job is to conserve what is precious in the here and now and seize the opportunities of the future. And nowhere is this clearer than in the clean energy transition. Now, I want to be crystal clear about this. I believe the transition to clean energy is a golden opportunity for Britain, especially for Scotland. That's exactly why we base GB Energy here where it belongs, in Scotland. So Scotland will lead the way, but you cannot come at this issue with simple principles divorced from the practicalities. No, this is a transition that must be managed pragmatically. Clean energy is a vital part of energy security. It strengthens our national security. It gets Putin's boots off our throat. But equally, the oil and gas in our waters is also vital for our security. So I repeat, oil and gas will be part of the future of Scotland for decades to come, decades. But it's not enough just to defend the jobs that are here now. We must also make sure we're at the front of the queue when it comes to the jobs of the future. Take Grangemouth, because that shows precisely the challenge. First, we must protect working people in the here and now. And let's be clear, we are. Every worker made redundant, every worker will get 18 months full pay. There will also be a skills and training offer, backed up with up to £10 million from the UK government. And any business within the Grangemouth Freeport area that takes on these workers will get national insurance relief. Now that is a comprehensive package, fair to workers, and a clear incentive for local businesses to retain the skills and talent within Grangemouth. But conference, we must also plan for Grangemouth's future. I've been talking to Anas about this, and I know we must do it quickly. Now, I said in the election that we will stand behind this symbol of Scotland's industrial brilliance, and that is what we will do. Grangemouth is not a charity case. It's not a problem to be solved. It's a huge opportunity for renewal, for this generation and beyond. I mean, just look at the assets. Access to the North Sea, a deep-sea port, an effective grid connection, infrastructure links to the North East, a strategic location midway between Scotland's two major cities, world-class universities, a skills pipeline for the future, a £100 million growth plan already in place, a partnership between this government and the Scottish government, and we welcome their support on this, the accelerator money they announced earlier this week. But conference, we need more. I can't put into words just how much of an afterthought industrial policy was for the previous UK government. It's not a surprise, but it's still shocking. And yet across these four nations, my Labour government has already taken decisive action to protect good British jobs in the industries that are vital for our economic security, saving Harland and Wolff, investing in the future of Hitachi in the northeast of England, a new plan for an electric arc furnace at Port Talbot secured this week. Grangemouth is such an opportunity. It could have a future in bioengineering, biofuels, or in hydrogen energy. But I promise you this, it will not lack ambition on our side. So I can announce today, we will grasp the opportunities at Grangemouth, work alongside partners to develop viable proposals, team up with businesses to get new industries off the ground, and to attract private investors into the partnership we need. We will allocate £200 million from the National Wealth Fund for investment in Grangemouth, investment in Scotland's industrial future. That is the difference a Labour government can make. Because we all know what happens if we don't win this race. It's written into the fabric of every community in this nation. The skills jobs that disappear. The communities that lost their place in the world. Not just the security and dignity of their work. Not just their pride and purpose. Their identity. That's the price of inaction when the winds of change blow this hard. The price of losing the race for new industries. And look, this is political as well. If we don't show a path to the future, others will fill that void. In fact, they already are. A dangerous right-wing politics, even here in Scotland, that will say they are the ones who can tilt politics towards the interests of working people, even as their proposals do precisely the opposite. A politics which feeds off the failure of the free market, the failure of public services to reform, and above all, the failure to control borders properly. We have to be ready for this test conference, ready to point out that beneath their bluster, the alternative they offer is alien to working people. You want to know what Farage and Reform are doing on their rare visits to Parliament? They're voting against our Employment Rights Bill. They talk the language of workers' rights online and on the doorstep, but they voted against banning fire and rehire. They voted against scrapping exploitative zero-hour contracts. They voted against sick leave and maternity pay. And what about the NHS? They want to charge people to use our NHS. They claim to be the party of patriotism, but they're fawning over Putin. No, they are not the answer for working people in Britain. And they are not the answer for Scotland. Contrast that with what you've seen from Anas and Jackie this weekend. what you've seen from the difference we're making in Westminster. And it's day and night. Only Labour can make the difference for working people. Only Labour will put more money in your pocket. Only Labour will fix our broken economy. Only Labour will secure our border. Only Labour can save our NHS, put police back on your streets, give our children the opportunities they deserve. Only Labour can deliver change for Scotland.
OK, that was the Prime Minister speaking there at the Scottish Labour conference in Glasgow, accusing Reform and Nigel Farage of perpetuating dangerous right-wing policies, saying that they didn't serve the needs of the working people. Politics which feeds into the failure of the free market, the failure to control borders properly. That's alien to working people, he said. He said that the Reform politicians had voted against extension of workers' rights, of reconstituting hire and refire, voting against sick leave and maternity pay, charging people to use the NHS and fawning over Putin. So that's Keir Starmer. Perhaps you'd like to send your responses into his speech. You know the email address, gbviews@gbnews.uk. But coming up next, we're going to be speaking to Israel's Deputy Foreign Minister, Sharon Haskell, who'll be here to discuss that extraordinary BBC documentary that featured, unbeknownst to the public, the children of Hamas fighters. Don't go anywhere, because it's going to be a compelling interview next.
I forecast a perfect holiday in the sun.
Weather looking good then?
For sure, and no worries about our travel insurance.
All Clear Travel Insurance sponsors GB News Travel Destinations Forecast.
Hello there. It still remains cold in Greece and Turkey, with the risk of showers stretching westwards as well, but dry across western parts of the Mediterranean. Canary Islands, 17, 18 degrees. Madeira as well, seeing some bright or sunny spells. Dry across central southern parts of Spain and Portugal. Rain across the north, and then showers for Italy across into Greece, where it will also feel quite hot, cold. Temperatures 8, 9, 10 Celsius. Turkey as well on the cold side. It does slowly start to warm up through the latter part of the week.
All Clear Travel Insurance sponsors GB News Travel Destinations Forecast.
Good morning. Welcome to your latest weather update from the Met Office. For most of us, it's going to be a wet and windy day today. Exceptions, the far southeast of England. Here we may actually just remain dry until after dark. But the rain's already moving in across Northern Ireland, Western Scotland, and that will just gradually spread its way eastwards as the day goes on. Some heavy rain at times, especially for southwest Scotland, northwestern parts of England too, and accompanied by a strong wind. Could see gales, potentially severe gales, especially along Irish Sea coasts. Temperatures on the face of it reaching double figures for many of us, but the wind and rain will temper the feel somewhat. So moving into the evening, some late glimmers of sunshine moving in across parts of Scotland, with a mixture of showers also moving in, with some of these showers potentially on the heavy side. Northern Ireland, a very similar picture here, with a mixture of clear spells and scattered showers to end the day. But we're back into the rain across northern England, and especially so for parts of Wales and southwestern England. Some heavy rain to end the afternoon here, with the rain also just beginning to arrive across the far southeastern corner. And this rain band will continue to track its way eastwards across England and Wales during the course of the night. A mixture of clear spells and blustery showers for Scotland and Northern Ireland, with the rain finally clearing the far north of England to be replaced by showers by the end of the night here. Temperatures for most of us staying firmly above freezing thanks to that wind and rain. So a cloudy, damp start to the day across many southern parts of England, but it will improve here as the day goes on. For the rest of us, really it is a mixture of sunshine and scattered blustery showers. Some of these showers could be potentially on the heavy, possibly thundery side, especially across parts of Scotland. And for most of us, temperatures reaching double figures once again, but again, that wind will just take an edge off of things, but potentially highs just still reaching the teens in the south.
This is Britain's Newsroom, where your voice matters.
It's just astonishing. With expert analysis and honest opinion, we don't just keep you informed.
We bring you unique perspectives you won't see anywhere else.
Can't argue with any of that. When the news happens, it happens here.
On Britain's Newsroom, weekdays from 9:30 a.m.
Only on GB News.
We're proud to be GB News, the People's Channel. And as you know, we always love to hear your views. Now, there's a new way of getting in touch with us at gbnews.com/your say. By commenting, you can be part of a live conversation and join our GB News community. You can even talk to me, Bev Turner, or any of the members of the GB News family.
Join me, Nana Okoye, for an informative, interactive news programme with a difference. It's fun.
No, he didn't say that, Dave.
I'm so surprised.
I think there's an element of truth to that.
Join me from 3 p.m. every weekend, only on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Welcome back. Israel's Deputy Foreign Minister Sharon Haskell joins me now from Israel. Ms. Haskell, thank you so much for your time this morning. I want to begin by asking you about this documentary that the BBC has had to remove from iPlayer. It's called Gaza: How to Survive a War Zone, and it was subsequently revealed to star the son of a Hamas minister, the daughter of a former captain in the Hamas-run police force, and a third child who has been photographed in the past posing with a Hamas fighter carrying an AK-47. What's your reaction to the BBC even putting this documentary out without telling viewers that the children featured in it are linked to Hamas?
Well, this is absolutely outrageous. This is pure propaganda that is being promoted by the BBC, Hamas propaganda. I mean, they surely knew about it. There is not a chance that they would film children for an extended period of time without knowing who their parents are. More so, the film crew and the photographers, the cameramen that they actually used, if they would have just done a small research on social media, they would see their celebrations on the murder of Jews on the 7th of October and on other occasions where Jews were attacked, were targeted, were brutally murdered. And those are the people that the BBC is funding, paying a whole lot of money to actually spread a pure terrorist organization propaganda. This is just outrageous. And I think that, you know, the most basic and fundamental rule is that the BBC needs to be impartial. And if the BBC is not impartial, then they should be investigated in deeply. British people, the British public shouldn't fund and shouldn't pay for Hamas propaganda.
Okay, so let me just drill down into those two areas. First of all, would the Israeli government advocate an Ofcom investigation into how this documentary came to be made? First of all, Ofcom, Ms. Haskell, I'm sure you're aware, is the regulator of TV and broadcasting in this country.
Mm-hmm. Well, if they declare an investigation, I think this is the first step in a long row of actions that should have been taken previously. When we see for a year and a half that the BBC is reporting one-sidedly, is distorting information, also reporting false information that's blackening the face of Israel. And we've caught them numerous times. They try to correct it time after time. But where is the responsibility of the report from the start? And so I think that should only be the first step in a long investigation and accountability that they have, have to take.
Okay, and also there is a campaign group called Defund the BBC, calling for the BBC to be stripped of its licence fee. What's your view on that in light of how they have covered the events since October the 7th?
Look, I try not to get into internal British issues, but if I would have been a British citizen and my money would have been paying for a terrorist organization propaganda, knowing the challenges not just that Israel's facing, but the radicalization all around the world, in Europe as well. We've just been through 2 weeks with numerous terrorist attacks because people were radicalized. And, we should seriously have an open conversation about it. And I think that it's rightfully that the British people should be concerned where their money go to.
Miss Haskell, we have been obviously very, very acutely aware of the return of the bodies of the Bibas family this week. That's Mrs. Bibas and her 2 children, toddler aged 4, a baby not even 1 year old. Can you just confirm, has Mrs. Bibas's body now been returned to Israel over a confusion over whose remains were sent back in the original coffin?
Well, you know, the Hamas is a murderous, monstrous terrorist organization. And, you know, we knew it's very difficult to trust them from the start. There were many issues from the start of the ceasefire where they broke some of the rules, but that was just monstrous. I can't even describe, you know, the feeling and everything that Israeli people have been through during this weekend. And it's not just that they sent an anonymous Palestinian body instead of the mother of those 2 babies of Shiri. You know, it's, as a mother in Israel with children, babies who are the same age as Kfir and Ariel, this haunts us, knowing that those 2 babies were strangled with bare hands. That's what the terrorists actually did. And then mutilated their bodies so that, you know, to try to deceive the world as if, you know, they were attacked or anything like that. I can't even imagine what kind of monster you need to be to actually do something like that. And Shiri's body was returned in the same condition, unfortunately. And you know what? This is a clear reality that us Israelis have to face. When you hear them chanting, when you hear them saying that they want the annihilation of the Israelis, of the state of Israel, of the Jews, I believe them. I know that because that's what they're capable of doing. And the world should know they're not joking. When those leaders are calling publicly in interviews, on social media, on every platform to brutally murder, execute ourselves, our children, they really mean it. And when we say we need to defend ourselves against those monsters, then it means that me, as a mother, I need to defend my babies against those monsters that are capable of executing them in the most horrific ways you can ever imagine.
Sharon Haskell, we have to leave it there, but thank you very much indeed for your impassioned words this morning. Let's be honest, our hearts have to go out to the father of those children and the husband of Mrs. Bibas. Absolutely horrific for him. I'm going to be back next week at 9:30 as usual, but coming up next, it's Michael Portillo on GB News from 11. Enjoy the rest of your Sunday.
We'll see a cold snap, which will quickly develop into a warm front. Boxed Boiler Repairs, sponsors of weather on GB News.
Good morning. Well, after a spring-like day yesterday, it's going to be wet and windy today, followed by sunshine and showers before the winds ease as we go through Monday. Having a look at a bigger picture then, we've got this deep area of low pressure out towards the north and west and a real squeeze in the isobars with these frontal systems moving in, bringing heavy spells of rain. There are wind warnings and rain warnings in force across the country, so do keep an eye on those with heavy and persistent rain, especially across the hills in the west, northwestern England, into Wales and the southwest of England, especially for southwestern Wales too. Otherwise, some strong winds out there coming up from the south, drawing up that mild air still, but probably feeling pretty unpleasant underneath all this heavy and persistent rain. So as we go through Sunday evening, we still hold on to this rain. It will really linger across parts of southern Wales and across parts of southwestern England. So do take care here. There could be disruption and spray on the roads. Behind that, across Northern Ireland and parts of Scotland, it's going to be a case of clear skies, but also some blustery showers moving through. So as we go through the rest of Sunday evening, then do take care if you're travelling through this evening. Flooding and spray on the roads as this band of rain across much of central parts of England and the south gradually shifts its way further eastwards. Behind that, it will turn drier, especially across Northern Ireland and Scotland, holding on to blustery showers here, but it will still be a mild night with temperatures not dropping far below 7 or 8 degrees. So a damp and dreary Monday morning, especially across southern parts of England, with the band of rain moving its way eastwards. Behind that, turning drier for most of us on Monday, still with a few showers around, blustery and heavy in the northwest of Scotland. Otherwise, it should be feeling pleasant in any sunny breaks, highs of up to 14 degrees.
Heavy showers first thing will be followed by a warm, cosy day. Boxed boilers, sponsors of weather on GB News.
There's just 2 weeks left to grab your chance to be one of 2 big winners in our latest Great British Giveaway. First, you'll win a totally tax-free £10,000 in cash to spend however you like. You'll also receive the very latest iPhone 16 and we'll send you on a shopping spree with £500 to spend in your favourite store. For another chance to win, text cash to 63232. One entry costs £2 plus 1 standard network rate message, or text bonus to 63232. 5 entries cost £5 plus 1 standard network rate message. Go to gbnews.com/win. Entries start from just £2. Call 0903 681 3232. Calls cost £2 plus your network access charge, or post your name and number to GB11 PO Box 8690 Derby DE1 9TT. UK only. Entrants must be 18 or over. Lines close at 6 p.m. on the 7th of March. Please check the closing time if listening or watching on demand.
Good Afternoon Britain isn't just about us. The wonderful thing about this programme is it's about everyone watching. It's an interactive programme.
Well, there absolutely is something to see here, and we're going to be talking about it more.
Whether it's breaking royal news, Will, please bring us up to date, or indeed a particularly punchy speech in the House of Commons.
Very, very curious.
We bring it to you live, and then we bring you live reaction as well.
That's Good Afternoon Britain, weekdays from midday.
Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Mornings don't have to be tiresome, especially if you have the right company.
Wake up to news as it happens, opinion and debate, and of course, a little bit of entertainment too.
Because when the kettle's on, we're on.
That's Breakfast on GB News, a show worth waking up for.
Every morning from 6 a.m.
Only on the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
We'll spread the news, you spread the word.
Hi, I'm Michelle Dewberry, and my show is your opportunity to cut through all the noise and dive in headfirst to some robust debates. Ideas clash.
Situation, isn't it?
Because
the failure is...
You're deliberately avoiding my point. Nothing's held back.
And if you think this is the end of it, wait for more.
And we do not shy away from the difficult stuff.
Sometimes I want to shake people and say, if only you understood.
So join me on Dubes & Co. weeknights at 6 p.m, only on GB News, Britain's news channel.
It's Patrick Christie's Tonight, and here we do things differently. It's explaining the absolute madness of this, doesn't it? It's explosive. I mean, this is very good. It's lively.
850. Your government sat there, Sean, and it did nothing.
It's controversial. And the Middle East has been in turmoil since before I was born. It's everything you need to kickstart your evening. Everyone's had their Weetabix tonight. I love to see it. That's Patrick Christie's Tonight, weeknights from 9 p.m. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Good morning and welcome to Sunday with Michael Portillo. We've reached the final Sunday in February, a month that has been described as the border between winter and spring. As we march on towards warmer days, you're most welcome here on GB News for 2 hours of arts, culture, current affairs and politics. Donald Trump says that Keir Starmer is doing a good job, but also that he's done nothing to end the war in Ukraine. The president says that the Ukrainian leader, Zelensky, can have no part in the treaty talks, but also urges him to make a deal with Vladimir Putin. If you were the British Prime Minister, how would you handle these incoherently contradictory statements? I'll ask my panel. Germans are at the polls today in what is being billed as a pivotal election following the collapse of the previous coalition government. I'll be joined by the journalist Rob Hyde, live from Berlin, who'll give us the latest. A new film on the German theologian Dietrich Bonhoeffer, who was executed by the Nazis, has its gala premiere in London this week. Filmmaker and director Todd Komarnicki will join me to discuss Bonhoeffer's remarkable story. And 2 new Shakespeare productions have hit the West End, with Jonathan Bailey starring as Richard II and Tom Hiddleston appearing in Much Ado About Nothing. Stefan Kyriazis will be here to give me his take. Before all of that, your news headlines with Tatiana Sanchez.
Michael, thank you very much. The top stories. Pope Francis has spent a tranquil night in hospital, according to the Vatican. The 88-year-old pontiff is currently in Rome's Gemelli Hospital, battling double pneumonia. The Vatican described his condition as critical for the first time yesterday, reporting that he'd needed supplemental oxygen and 2 blood transfusions. The Holy Father's condition, they say,